What if the most tragic family in America, so vulnerable they cannot speak for themselves, wasn't just filmed, but controlled, manipulated, and financially exploited, all under the disguise of help? In the heart of West Virginia, the Whittaker family became internet legends, icons of inbreeding, isolation, and misunderstood humanity. Their faces, captured in documentaries, sparked global fascination. But behind the views, the thumbnails, and the viral fame, something darker was unfolding. After a fire reduced their home to ashes in 2024, sympathy surged. Donations poured in. So did promises. One man stepped forward, Eric Carroll. He wasn't the first to film the Whittakers, but he vowed to be different, transparent, ethical, committed. He said he was there to protect them. But today, Carroll is under criminal investigation by the West Virginia State Police. The charge? Fraudulently soliciting donations and merchandise meant for the very family he claimed to serve. This is not a drama for clicks. This is a real family, many of whom cannot read, write, or even speak. Individuals whose trust had to stand in for informed consent. And as the world watched their pain unfold on camera, the question few dared ask became unavoidable. What were Eric's real intentions? Was it ever about care, or was it always about control? This video exposes 7 dark truths behind the man who claimed to save the Whittakers, but may have instead weaponized their suffering for profit. Every statement, every dollar, every public betrayal. We follow the evidence. No lies, no assumptions, just the truth and the silence it uncovered. Welcome to the side of the Whittaker story you weren't supposed to see. 1. It began with flames. In late 2024, a fire tore through the Whittaker family's mobile home in Odd, West Virginia. Their shelter was reduced to charred debris. Clothes, furniture, memories, all gone. The family, including their dogs, was forced to squeeze into a cramped structure across the street, already unfit for their needs. It was a humanitarian crisis, magnified by decades of poverty, disability, and neglect. And it was the perfect moment for someone looking to profit from pity. As public sympathy surged, so did the donations. Videos of the scorched trailer spread across social media, accompanied by desperate calls for help. Into this chaos stepped Eric Carroll. He presented himself as a savior. With a YouTube channel dedicated to documenting the Whittakers, Carroll claimed he was spearheading a rebuilding effort. He posted updates, staged emotional moments, and accepted money from thousands of trusting donors. He positioned himself as the family's protector. But less than a year later, the truth surfaced. On September 15, 2025, the West Virginia State Police issued a formal fraud bulletin naming Eric Carroll and associate Patrick Roark. The accusation? Fraudulently collecting funds and merchandise in the name of the Whittaker family. An active criminal investigation was launched. Victims were urged to come forward. What began as a tragedy turned into a trap. The fire wasn't just a disaster. It was used as a marketing tool, a trigger for sympathy. And according to state investigators, the fundraising that followed was not charity. It was deception. 2. The Whittakers didn't choose to become content. They didn't sign contracts. They didn't script scenes. They didn't give interviews in the traditional sense. Yet somehow the dynamics of their private life, who stayed, who left, who got evicted, began playing out like plot points in a reality show. And the man pulling those narrative strings was Eric Carroll. One of the most telling moments came when Carroll openly confirmed that he and Patrick Roark were working nonstop to evict B.J. Whittaker, a relative living in the family home. Not because of violence, not because of abuse, but because, in Carroll's words, they cannot continue to live like this. It wasn't just about space, it was about control. Removing BJ simplified the storyline. It cleared the stage. It gave Eric and his camera unfiltered access to a more cohesive family unit. one that was easier to film, easier to manage, and easier to monetize. This wasn't just documentation. It was editing the cast. In a household where several members cannot speak, cannot consent, and cannot legally represent themselves, the removal of one adult relative raises massive ethical red flags. Who gave Carroll that right? What legal authority did he have to restructure a family's living arrangement? This wasn't about help. It was about stability for the algorithm, making sure the household remained functional enough to film, but distressed enough to draw views. In the absence of formal guardianship, Carroll assumed the role himself, unasked, unchecked, and perhaps for all the wrong reasons. 3. Donations came in waves. After the fire, the story of the Whittakers wasn't just viral, it was visceral. People felt compelled to give, to help, to act, and they did in large numbers. Money, gift cards, supplies. Thousands of dollars flowed in, often through direct links provided by Eric Carroll. But then came the silence. No breakdown of expenses, no published receipts, no third-party oversight. Just vague assurances from Carroll that everything was going toward helping the family. The few updates that were posted raised more questions than answers. What exactly was bought? What repairs were made? How much was raised, and how much was kept? Despite claiming he was building a sustainable and transparent support system, Carroll failed to provide a single independent financial audit. This wasn't just an oversight. It was the foundation of what later became a criminal investigation, because without transparency, trust becomes currency. And trust, as it turns out, is easy to counterfeit on camera. Investigators from the West Virginia State Police later confirmed that Carroll and his associate were under formal scrutiny for misappropriating funds and merchandise. Money that was supposed to rebuild lives, not bankroll content. The lack of financial clarity was not incidental. It was intentional. Opacity became a shield, one that protected Carroll from accountability while allowing the illusion of aid to continue generating donations. The darkest truth here is not just where the money went. It's that no one, including the Whittakers, was ever truly allowed to ask. 4. There's a difference between helping and taking control. Eric Carroll didn't stop at raising money or filming content. He went further, into the legal, deeply personal fabric of the Whittaker family. According to his own public statements, Carroll contacted Adult Protective Services, APS, to report the family's condition. On the surface, that might seem responsible. But context changes everything. This was not a case of an outsider discovering abuse. This was a man embedded in the family's life, profiting from their exposure, who took it upon himself to involve state authorities, just as financial scrutiny around him was escalating. The call wasn't just about general welfare. It was tied to ongoing custody discussions surrounding Timmy Whittaker, a severely cognitively impaired family member often regarded as the most vulnerable of them all. Involving APS meant potentially triggering state intervention, court proceedings, and guardianship hearings. It also positioned Carroll not just as a documentarian, but as an informal gatekeeper of the family's future. The timing was no coincidence. Legal involvement can justify control. It can create dependency. And in a household with no clear legal advocate, it can also create power. By involving APS, Carroll moved from filming the family's life to reshaping it. And once again, the Whittakers had no voice in the process, no lawyer, no advocate, no informed consent. Only a camera, a growing platform, and a man who claimed he was helping, while silently assuming authority he was never given. 5. It always falls apart from within. For months, Eric Carroll and Patrick Roark presented themselves as a united front, a team committed to helping the Whittakers rebuild, recover, and survive. Their partnership was central to their narrative: 2 men, 1 mission, and a family in need. Then, without warning, Carroll turned. He publicly denounced Roark, calling him a snake. The once shared project fractured under pressure. Leaked phone calls surfaced. Accusations flew. Carroll framed himself as the betrayed party, insisting that while mistakes had been made, the real villain was his partner. But this wasn't redemption, it was strategy. By burning the bridge, Carroll attempted to salvage his own image. Casting Roark as the rogue actor allowed him to shift blame, redirect scrutiny, and control the narrative as the legal net tightened around them both. But the West Virginia State Police didn't see it that way. Their fraud bulletin named both men equally. Carroll and Roark were jointly identified as suspects in a criminal scheme involving the theft of funds and merchandise meant for the Whittaker family. This wasn't a rogue employee. It was a co-conspirator. And the betrayal wasn't just personal. It was performative. It bought time. It manipulated public perception. And it served as one last attempt to preserve Carroll's access to the platform, the donors, and the story. But the illusion was cracking. Because in the end, even among exploiters, loyalty ends when the money runs out. 6. Pain became product. Every video had a hook, Ray's confusion, Timmy's expressions, the wreckage of a burned home. The thumbnails showed dirt-covered faces, hollow stares, and tearful updates. The titles promised heartbreak. The content delivered it. But what was being sold wasn't hope. It was suffering. Eric Carroll built a channel around the Whittaker family's misery. Videos like Ray Whittaker's struggles and A Tear-Filled Day weren't just updates. They were content assets, strategically crafted for virality. Emotional appeal was the algorithm's fuel. And the deeper the pain, the higher the click-through rate. Behind the camera, the Whittakers were crumbling. According to reports, the constant filming, the online comments, the staged moments, it all took a mental toll. There was no quiet, no privacy, no consent. Just lights, lenses, and endless exposure. The more tragic the narrative, the more profitable the episode. Carroll had promised transparency. What he delivered was trauma on a loop. The business model was clear. Keep the family unstable enough to stay interesting, but not so unstable that the content stops. In this twisted formula, chaos becomes currency, and human dignity becomes collateral. This wasn't accidental. It was systematic. A real family, suffering from intergenerational disability, grief, and now displacement, was turned into a subscription service of sadness. The internet kept watching, the donations kept flowing, and behind it all stood a man who claimed to care, while feeding the algorithm the one thing it rewards most: endless, intimate despair. 7. You can't say yes if you don't understand the question. Many members of the Whittaker family, especially Timmy, live with profound intellectual disabilities. Some can't speak. Others communicate only through sounds. They cannot manage money, read contracts, or understand how their image is used online. And yet, their faces, routines, breakdowns, and tragedies have been broadcast to millions. This isn't just unethical. It's a breach of basic human rights. Eric Carroll, and others before him, filmed the Whittakers as if they were willing participants. But the reality is darker. There was no clear consent, no legal guardianship granting filming rights, and no independent advocate ensuring that their exposure was safe or fair. International human rights law, including the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, makes clear that vulnerable individuals must be protected from exploitation, especially when they cannot fully comprehend the implications of public exposure. That protection was never provided. Instead, private family conflicts were aired. Medical issues were discussed. Legal proceedings were filmed. These weren't documentaries. They were content machines, fueled by silence and cognitive inability. And that's the final truth. Consent was never truly given. Because how can it be When the people being filmed can't understand where their image is going, who's profiting from it, or why the world keeps watching. In the end, what was taken from the Whittakers wasn't just money or shelter or privacy. It was their right to decide whether they wanted to be seen at all. Eric Carroll came promising shelter, stability, and stewardship. What he delivered was exposure without consent, control without authority, and, according to state investigators, fundraising without integrity. The Whittakers are still here, still grieving, still displaced. But now, they carry not just the burden of disability and loss, but the betrayal of trust. This isn't just a story about one man's alleged crimes. It's about a system where pain becomes profit, and where the voiceless are made to perform for an audience they never invited. So ask yourself, when their faces fade from thumbnails, who will fight for their truth?